Hello, I'm you, from the future. As you are about to find out, or have found out, depending on when this letter arrives, a lockdown will be starting. You may not know why, you may not believe it, but it is all because of a virus, COVID-19. The lockdown, something which will stop everything, will last 12 to 14 weeks. And when I say everything, I mean everything.
I think the first challenge for me, which was a little bit unexpected, I guess, was adjusting to being at home so much. So for the last few years, I've travelled a lot with work. On average, would probably be away 2 nights a week, a few late nights, very early mornings. And throughout that time, would always be wishing that although I didn't dislike it necessarily, but was always wishing I could be at home a little bit more. And when that opportunity arose because of COVID, I guess initially it was really good, but there was also a little bit of adjusting, I think, for all of us, of actually I'm here 24 hours a day.
Yeah, it was a worrying time, I'll be honest. I'd got it into my head that if I'd got it or my husband had got it, that both of us wouldn't have survived it because we both have underlying health issues. And I was really worried. I was really scared, I'll be honest. So how I coped with that, I basically isolated myself in the house. I wouldn't go out shopping. I wouldn't go out to meet anybody. I saw myself as keeping myself safe so that I could continue going into work. Because obviously they needed the staff to continue going into work and working in the nursing home environment.
Just before lockdown, I had the virus. And so coming up to that, I was a bit, oh dear, poor old people that are going to die of this, but I'm actually very fit, so I won't die, even though by then we didn't have this stuff about Asians being more vulnerable. So I got it on the 22nd of March, which was literally just before lockdown. So I didn't really have a lot of time to think about what lockdown was like for the first 2 weeks. And I discovered that, when my friends were getting bored of lockdown, I was just starting. Because it was about 5 days of being really ill and then about 5 days of getting better. And then about 5 days of building up my strength again for doing all my walking and stuff. So yeah, I got half of lockdown for free.
No, I was very disappointed. I realised that pretty soon that we wouldn't be able to see other people. And we spent a lot of time with friends. We've got friends who've been friends for 40 years. And to not be able to see them, to give them a hug when we did see them from a distance was really difficult. Not seeing family because they're spread out the country. We have some up in Scotland and some down in Essex. So, we spend time visiting them on train journeys and so forth. We weren't doing that. And that was disappointing. And I also had a big 70th birthday planned for June this year. And it rapidly became obvious that we weren't going to be able to do that. And that was our one attempt to get the whole extended family together. So there were going to be 80 of us together. Big party. And it all had to be cancelled. So it was such a shame. But then my wonderful family came up with a virtual party. So I had a virtual party on my birthday. And everything from food being delivered, a giant Zoom session in the afternoon. So everybody we'd invited to the party came on Zoom to wish me a happy birthday. So that was this next best thing.
Because I was fairly lucky to be working in a sector where actually work continued. There was no prospect of furlough or whatever. Being in some ways busier than I'd been for some time because of everything going on in the care home sector. Working out how I could be just as effective from home and adjusting to all sorts of technology which just before that I would have been horrified at the prospect of using.
We've literally gone to spend every day, every minute of every hour in the house together. So that was a challenge in itself. My husband throughout that hasn't been very well, which was another challenge because admitting that there's been problems has obviously caused a little bit of, conflict between the two of us, but we've worked through it and we've got there. We're quite healthy again, aren't we? Physically and mentally.
I remember that I didn't really do very much. I just kind of sat around with this iPad and watched YouTube. And then, as time went on, I maybe did some schoolwork or did some, I don't know, like I did some reading and then I started doing more and more over the course of lockdown, I guess.
I think in the immediate sense, it was probably a real sense of going through something that was probably going to be the biggest thing we would go through in our lives, I think, and a real sense of living history. Feeling quite a weight watching that speech, and almost a sense of palpitation of what it was going to mean, and because it was so unfamiliar and unnatural, and probably a bit of disbelief as well at it all. Just you sort of naturally think, oh well, I'll go and do something tomorrow, and then actually the realisation that the scope for leaving the house was so limited. It was sort of, you kept having to remind yourself that this wasn't sort of just some fictional dystopian situation.
I kind of like learn new skills, or at least like started learning new skills, like say I can't remember what it's called, but where you can just like type without looking at the keyboard at all, and like try juggling, and I got quite good at like spinning a stick.
And then I started realising that there were pluses and minuses, that I didn't have to do all the things that I'd signed up to do when I retired, like, you know, being the secretary of this committee and the treasurer of that, because those things weren't happening. So I could choose to do the actual things that I really like doing. And I've probably been out and about more than I was in the first year of my retirement, which was last year, because that, you know, that's the thing you're still allowed to do. I must admit, I broke the 1 hour rule every single day. I never went just an hour's walk.
Alma, at that point in time, would only have been about 9 months, so blissful ignorance. George, yeah, I guess telling him he wouldn't be going to nursery anymore, wouldn't be able to see his friends, and we wouldn't be meeting up with grandparents and all of that sort of thing. Yeah, trying to. So again, he was only three and a few months at that point. So we talked about the bugs. So the fact there's bugs going round, and once the bugs have gone away, we'll be able to see people. And funnily enough, that was exactly the same conversation I was having with him this morning about when the bugs have gone and what we might be able to do.
The way that I find out about most things is like at meal times, my dad just like randomly says stuff like, oh, there's now a vaccine. Oh, we're now going into lockdown. Oh, we're now in tier 3. Like that kind of thing. And so that's kind of how I get most of it. And sometimes we like watch the news, like as a family, but that's only when there's like something big happening.
To me, it was a really scary time because none of us knew how things were going to pan out, and none of us knew what the future held for us. And it was a really, really worrying time. And I was worried. I was really worried. Not only for myself, but for my family as well, for the neighbours. Like I said, nobody knew. But then as time went on, and it was as if it wasn't real because we didn't know anybody. You know, it was happening. You know, you were seeing the numbers on the television of all the people that had died, and that day you were getting daily updates. You know, I was getting daily emails, you know, the county figures and what have you, and it was as if it was surreal, really, because it wasn't happening here. But then all of a sudden you just started to hear one by one people that we knew, that was in our own town, in our own area, getting it. And it became a little bit more real then.
Particularly our next door neighbours, we've got to know really quite well and forged really good relationships with them. So I think like Amy and the lady next door went through a phase of swapping baked goods with each other as that was happening. I keep joking that when lockdown ended and we could start to see grandparents again, that Alma, again at that stage, would have been 9, 10, 11 months old. Quite sadly didn't really have much time for her grandparents, and when we went to see them would sort of look at them with this just complete lack of recognition, would get a little bit upset, and we sort of felt we were having to socialise her. But she absolutely loves the next door neighbour, the man that lives next door, and would beam every time we went out and would shout to get his attention and see him.
There are times when I think, especially in relation to family, that I won't see my grandchildren for a while, and certainly, one of them doesn't believe in hugging anymore, which is really sad. Thinks that, I don't think he ever really liked hugging anyway, but now he's got a really good excuse to not even sit on the same sofa. And I've seen children when I've been on walks that are actually frightened of strangers, which is really sad, because you have some kids who want to come up and talk to you and tell you about the stick they've picked up or whatever, and you've got others who go and hide behind their mummies, and I think that's a horrible change.
I also rapidly became very, very angry because I realised that people weren't taking it seriously, and that made me cross, because it was obvious that it was going to be a very, very difficult time, and this disease, this virus, was not going to go away. And people had to listen to what was being said. And they weren't listening. They were saying, oh, I'm all right. You go down the street, nobody had a mask on. Oh, nothing wrong with me. People were not taking it sensibly. And that made me quite cross.
Our class closed because somebody in the class was tested positive. And so we kind of just set up Microsoft Teams, and I mean, for me, it's been going okay, but there are some people who just can't do it at all.
Our sense of what's normal has rapidly changed, and the longer we live in this sort of situation where we can't get any closer than 2 meters to each other, that's bound to have some long-lasting legacy.
It was lovely going out on a Thursday night when people did the clapping. In fact, it was the only time we spoke to the neighbours. It was on a Thursday night when we were all out, giving them a wave and asking them if they were all right. So that little bit of, it was like togetherness. We were all in it together. We were all isolated in our own houses, but on a Thursday night we became one. So that was lovely.
We didn't for the first couple of weeks because I felt it was excluding the care home sector. It seemed very angled towards NHS, as a lot of the narrative was at that point in time, and I don't want to take anything away from the NHS, but it felt like that all of those nurses and carers that were doing the work in the care homes looking after vulnerable people were being forgotten about. And that wasn't just in the clap, it was things like Morrison's and Sainsbury's were doing brilliant schemes of having a set time allocated for NHS staff to be able to shop, but our staff were being turned away at the doors when they've just finished potentially a 24-hour shift. So I resisted the first couple of weeks, and it probably felt a bit unusual as well to do anyway. We did after that join, and the first time we did it, found it really quite fantastic, and I think that goes again to that sense of people wanting to bond from the separate doorsteps. It's a shame in some ways that it's taken something as tragic as this year to highlight the good work that goes on and the challenges that people working in the homes face. It's fairly gruelling work, I think, and people don't do it for money or reward or recognition. They do it because they've got a vocation and they want to look after vulnerable people. Unfortunately, as we saw at the beginning of the year, it was the care homes that really suffered, and I think that did force people to look at absolutely these remarkable people who in some cases were leaving their families behind to go and dedicate themselves to looking after people. And some stories that I heard early on, they made big sacrifices, and I think there is that public recognition now, which is good.
Another one of the biggest challenges for me was the fact that I was parted from my grandson. That was really an awful time to be parted from him, because they needed us as much as we needed them, but like I say, I'd made the decision that I had to continue going into work and keep myself safe for that. So that's a sacrifice that I had to make. But I'm now back in their support bubble and I'm not going to come back out of it. It would be very, very sad if we lost the personal touch with people. You know, we're human beings at the end of the day. We need to communicate and to have interaction with other people. So I hope we do get some of that back, but I do think a lot of meetings particularly might end up being virtual rather than actual face-to-face in the future.
I've probably found that actually my opinions on things this year have taken a bit of a back seat on things as I try and understand what is motivating people and what is causing people to think the way that they do and how that influences their actions. It's felt like everything just feels existential at the moment, and maybe it is, but witnessing that happening in real time, but what feels like quite rapid real time, it's an interesting time to live through.
I suppose the greatest challenge is actually being told what to do by people you don't trust. I've never been very good at since I was a child, I'm very good at doing what I was told to do. But by people that you really don't trust makes it even harder.
So I was disappointed, I was upset, I was angry. And then I thought, well, there's no point in being any of those things. That's not going to help. Just have to change the way we live and accept it and get on with it, basically.
And when quite a lot of what I like, when I sort of like things on Facebook, is comedy. It's sort of, you know, making mock of the situation. So I think that's one of my big ways of dealing with things, is keep laughing.
I think probably one of the biggest things is I've learned how resilient I am. You've got to be. You can't, you know, get upset by everything that happens. You've got to say, okay, that's happened, how am I going to deal with it? And find a way through it. We've managed to see our families, albeit sitting outside in the garden with coats on, you know, we've managed to do that. And we've had to make do with doing that.
During the lockdown, I just felt as if like the air seemed fresher. You know, there wasn't, with all of the traffic and what have you that we used to have before, because obviously this is a main road on the estate, you know, and all of that limited. And I just felt as if everything seemed to look brighter. You know, even the colours of the leaves on the trees seemed brighter. Don't know whether it was just me or what, but that's what it looked like to me, as if everything was just that little bit more brighter out there. You know, and I wouldn't like us all to go back to our busy lives, you know.
Yes, I do love my garden, and it was lovely this year. It was really gorgeous colours, and it was as tidy as it's ever been, because didn't have anything else to do, you know. And we got masses of vegetables, which we've been sharing with people as well, so that's been good. It's very much been an extension of our house, an extension of our living.
Actually, everybody, when you pass them in the street, needs a bit of a chat. You know, it's that you like somebody you normally just go hi and walk on. You stop and talk because they maybe haven't talked to anyone else that day, and they might not. So, and the same for me. If I have a whole day when I haven't talked to anybody, I'm on the phone, pretending somebody's here that night. Because I think you might lose your voice if you don't talk every day.
Was able to benefit from not having to rush out to work. So normally I'd have been in the office. If I was in the office for about 8 o'clock, or I'd be on a train platform at 6:30 or something like that. So actually being able to lie in until 7 or whenever was nice. And then it would sort of be a collective effort of getting the children ready, unusually being able to have breakfast together, which again was not something we would normally benefit from. And it certainly felt like a more casual start to the day. There was a lot of time leading up to the start of work, which was normally sort of let's just get ready and get out and all the rest of it.
It took a lot of getting used to, but once I got used to it, I liked it. You know, I suddenly found I had time for me, you know, which I'd never had before. So out of the whole situation, I don't think there's all been negatives at all. There's been quite a lot of positives, well, for my life anyway.
The family did a weekly Zoom quiz, and remember thinking actually that because it involved uncles and aunties, that actually COVID and lockdown probably brought us closer together, because there was no way I would speak to my aunties or my uncle every week whereas actually, because we were all locked down, we started doing that, which I guess that was one of the optimistic bits that in a perverse way, COVID brought about. And I think there were some things early on which did give some cause for hope and cause for optimism, which was an interesting feeling. Despite everything going on, there was that sense of hope early on.
That was lovely, and do you know, it was something to look forward to every week, you know, on a Friday night when we all got together. I got my bottle of Baileys out because I was always last. And I didn't mind that, I was on my own.
We have a family WhatsApp, and the banter that goes on in that family WhatsApp is wonderful, it really is. And when the day that our great-granddaughter was born, we had a blow-by-blow account from Tom. It was wonderful. And we were being kept up to date with, you know, how far she was and when the baby was born, and he took loads of pictures and little videos, and that's been lovely. You know, having videos sent just a few seconds, it really makes you feel as if you're part of the family. It's great.
The only other thing was a real sense of togetherness, even though we're all separate. There was a real sense of camaraderie and unity of purpose, almost, which again was probably quite unusual given the years of division and challenge that the country's seen.
I would also suggest, do not let mum and dad pay for grade 4 guitar because I give up on guitar. If there's anything else that I think of, I will be sure to let you know. Best wishes, you from the future.
Dear Susan, hindsight is a wonderful thing, so they say, and it is. Or it would be if it were possible to use it to improve a situation.
During the lockdown,
we would have benefited from a bit of hindsight at the start of 2020.
Countryside around you,
Let me
more than
explain,
ever.
and hopefully
As a
you will
single
learn
person,
from our
you might feel
experience.
isolated, but you have a good community around you. Digital communications will become more important than ever, but you will miss face-to-face communication.
Henny has been told she has to home work, so she will be looking after an 11-month-old baby while trying to concentrate on her office work. I'm so worried for her.
You will save money, you will not be able to enjoy all those copies and
They need me
feel
as
like
much as
a
I
lone
need
voice
them.
shouting into the
My
wind.
son-in-law works in retail.
But it won't all be bad, not at all. After years of travelling for work and being away from home, you're going to have more opportunity to spend time with family and to create cherished memories. You'll be there to witness Alma's first steps. You'll see George start to read, to learn his numbers, and, believe it or not, set off to school every morning. You won't miss a bath time or a bedtime story. You'll be there for every breakfast, dinner and tea. Enjoy this unique
As a retired person, the impact will be far smaller on you.
You'll come to realise that you've never known
And
before
of
the
course, if we
strength
want to
that
sing,
your family
we'll
brings
need to
you.
stand at the other end of the street.
Good luck.
Carol singing will be a little
Walia.
bit tricky.